Hello and welcome to Microsoft's Higher Education Remote Learning Series. COVID-19 has created a challenging year for Australian universities. The impact has been so fast moving, there's been little time to shift courses online, to upskill staff, and to figure out how to deliver engaging online learning experiences for students. Join me in the next 4 episodes, where I'll be interviewing some academics from Australian universities who've been teaching via online tools for quite some time. The idea is to inspire others to help talk about some of the tools and strategies that they've been using to create rich online experiences and to have a discussion about what works and what doesn't. I really hope you enjoy the series. Welcome everyone to our fireside chat about online learning. My name's Travis Smith. I'm the Education Industry Lead for Microsoft Australia. And today I've got the great pleasure of talking with Associate Professor Bardo Fraunholz, who is the Faculty Director of Analytics in the Deakin Business School. Part of his role, and I'm sure there's many different aspects to his role, but part of his role is to be in charge of the project management discipline in the Deakin Business School. And he teaches project management as well as teaching the Information Systems Capstone course. So welcome, Bardo, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Travis.
Can you tell me a little bit about your role? I mean, you're faculty director of analytics, but also have a teaching role. So just tell me a little bit about what your role is and what that all means.
Yeah, at Deakin, every academic has a number of different duties, and we do research, we do teaching, and we do some academic service. And in my case, I've chosen to emphasize my academic service a little bit because I'm really interested in the analytics space. And I was trying to get a bit of an early start on learning analytics. And then I've discovered that there's actually a broader role around analytics because there's a lot of academic duties that can be benefited by applying analytics. So learning analytics, I think everybody knows what that is, but we are really in its infancy and we are trying to develop that really as an early start at Deakin. So learning analytics for me is one of my passions because I want to improve students' outcomes. And we've got currently a number of projects where we are trying to identify possible patterns to support students with special needs or from disadvantaged backgrounds, or students that basically just for some reason underperform, and we want to understand better why they underperform and how we can assist them better. So I like my role because it gives me a lot of exploratory opportunities and it's closely linked to research as well.
Right. That's really interesting. And you're right, learning analytics is at, it's an embryonic stage, I suppose, and I think there's some real promise in what it might afford us in the future. Tell me a little bit about the capstone industry program that you run, or the course that you run, and what's the purpose of that? And it's at the end of a degree, isn't it? So tell me a little bit about the program.
Absolutely, yes. So the capstone, as it normally does, sits at the end of the degree, and it's designed to bring together the student learning throughout the degree. So we're running a Master of Information Systems at Deakin, and it's a very successful program. And it's actually unusually large for Master of Information Systems. So in a capstone, I would actually get about 150 students, which presents a particular challenge when you're trying to run an engaged, with industry connected program where students get a real life experience bringing together all their learning. So for us, the capstone was really a matter of passion. I wanted the capstone to be as close to reality as possible in the safe environment of a university, but giving the students the opportunity to develop skills, not in addition to what they have learned, but develop skills showing that their learning can be applied in real life scenarios. And of course, also giving them an opportunity to facilitate this as a selling point for their skills when they move into an interview. So it was part of the employability drive as well, because I wanted students to have a story to tell. When they go into an interview, they can tell that they are actually in an environment where they've done a real project, they've worked as a team, they're using industry standard tools, and they are ready to really start a job in that business analyst type environment that we're qualifying them for.
Yeah, and so given that you're kind of really focused on the future skills of students, even before the current situation we're in with COVID-19 and everything else that's happening, did you always create or try to create a really sort of technology-rich collaborative experience for students within that capstone course?
So for me, technology was a key component of what an information system students needs to be able to navigate. So I felt that we would do our students a disservice if we didn't bring technology into the learning, even when we didn't have to go online. And collaboration was always a key element of what the capstone was about, because collaboration was not just located between students working as a team, but it was also collaboration between teams and their client, because in the capstone, I bring in industry clients and students get real industry projects that they work on. And of course, there's a lot of interaction necessary to communicate with the client. And in this day and age, the clients donate their time to us very generously to work with our students. I don't want to place additional burdens on them. So I said, well, we are living in an environment where you can just video in for the conversation with the students. Here's an hour that we need you. You can go on and log on and you can communicate with the students, and then you log off. You don't need to drive out to our campus and communicate with the students and drive back and waste half a day. So technology was part of the experience, and I felt students needed that experience to give them credibility as information systems professionals.
Yeah. And so one of the other interesting things that I know you're really passionate about is the pedagogy, the teaching and learning strategies that are associated around, your teaching. And so, we often talk about the idea of, with the current shift to more people sort of going online, is that this is not really about online teaching, it's about online learning, and there's a distinct difference between those two things, because one implies I'm delivering content, the teaching bit, and one implies you're kind of creating a learning experience through technology that allows the students to be the owners of the learning. And so how do you do that? Like, how do you create sort of a collaborative experience where you just mentioned there's industry people coming in, they're working on real projects, they're in groups. How do you manage that within the technology and within the pedagogy?
It's a real challenge. And I start off with a statement that our previous Deputy Vice Chancellor Education made at some point, where she was very clear that teaching online is not about lecturing or video recordings, it's about engagement. And the engagement component is critical at any level. So it's not just in online teaching, it's actually critical in the classroom as well, because you can see students vote with their feet when they go to the classroom and choose to disengage. They will sometimes drop off and you will actually have very small numbers in the classroom. So engagement is critical for learning and to keep students engaged with the learning process. In my capstone, it was a real problem because I've got a number of different challenges, and I'm going to try to unpack them a little bit. One is I've got, because of the nature of the capstone, teamwork. And teamwork is one of the things that students typically don't like, because they feel, oh, I'm doing all the work, others don't do anything. And there's a lot of conflict because a lot of the time students don't really know each other that well, and they can't rely on each other, and there's friction. And you've got the typical team formation challenges that we have in industry as well.
Yeah.
But they have to make do with that in a very short time frame of a trimester and come together and actually deliver an outcome. So that's one of the challenges. The other challenge is communicating with an external partner, where we have to teach them the etiquette of how to do that, and not knowing that person and possibly never seeing that person face to face. Sometimes I do bring the person in. I try to bring the client in for the first meeting so they meet face to face, but it's not always possible. And getting a relationship at a professional level with a professional in industry that they're working for and trying to solve a problem for, but at the same time knowing that that person could potentially be a future referee for them, even a future employer for them, because they're working for that person, they're trying to make an impression, and everybody wants to get that a little bit of a head contact with that client, because it's a competitive environment for the students as well. So that creates a challenge. So there's that element of competition within the team. Then there's the challenge of us as facilitators of this capstone, and I deliberately use the term facilitator, or mentor is the other term I frequently use, rather than lecturer, to communicate with the students in an efficient way and make sure that the students don't get bogged down with too much communication from us, but we can keep eyes on what they're doing, how they're progressing, and give them short, quick sort of, I guess, intervention messages to say, you know what, have you thought about this? Or maybe you should reconsider going down that rabbit hole because it's not going to lead you anywhere, without feeling that Big Brother is watching over them all the time, but actually being there for them and having an easy communication path with them whenever they need help. So these challenges are actually relevant to online teaching as much as they are to classroom teaching. In the classroom, of course, you have the benefit that you have that once a week anchor point where you can communicate to everyone with ease because you see them and you look at people's faces and you can understand if they are actually on board with it or a little bit lost. That dimension is suddenly lost in an online environment. And you need to find a way to get that feedback channel that is so critical for us teachers in a, I guess, virtual environment opened up back up again so that we can get that immediate feedback so that we don't lose the students and keep them engaged with where we are trying to go.
Yeah, so you have small groups of students working with a client to solve a problem or to do something with that client. How does the technology look? You use Teams to run the capstone course. I mean, do they have private areas where each group works individually? Do you drop in and out? How do you? I suppose there's a couple of things. How do you structure it in terms of the technology using Teams? And secondly, how do you monitor, how they're going or what they're up to, or is their program going well, or is there one student not doing much and others doing heaps? How do you manage that in terms of the group work?
These are really interesting challenges, and we started working with teams about 2.5 years ago, so very early on, and we really tried to get a communication platform working that enabled us to have an easy channel of communication with the students. So that was one of the key issues that we were trying to solve: easy access to students and good communication back to us. And I don't know if you had a look at learning management systems in recent years, but learning management systems haven't really evolved past being a content management system. They do have discussion areas, but they're actually not very easy to use, and they don't actually link to anything that students like to use. So it's a separate space students need to log into. They can not do this on the mobile with ease. It's not a pleasant experience for them, and they do it more as a compliance exercise. I check my discussion area in whatever learning management system you use once a week because I have to see what my lecturer is saying. And we wanted to have a platform that is more instant, where students get immediate feedback, they get notifications, they don't mind having that platform open all the time because it's easy for them to run in the background, and where they can communicate with us with the same level of ease, but also where they can take responsibility for their communication, because we want to make sure that they direct a lot of their questions to their team or to their other members in the unit. And we want to also make sure that we know when they want us to respond. So we needed that filtering opportunity for students to direct messages clearly to us or to me as the unit chair of the unit when they needed my guidance, and understand that when they put messages out to everyone, I'm not going to jump in and take priority. I will possibly see it. I will possibly respond if I feel I have to, but they shouldn't expect me to because it wasn't directed at me. So I needed a platform that had structure and allowed me to have communication with clear directions, with some sort of etiquette around how the communication is structured, but informal enough not to be a formal email with hi, and signing off all the time. And I needed also channels where students could work as a group of 6 students typically, or where they could communicate back to the whole class of 150 students, so that they could easily understand in which area they can post what and how to direct it at the lecturers, at their colleagues, at the client, and channel that communication in an efficient way.
And so are they the 6 students who are working together on a project, do they have a private channel in Teams so that they're the only ones who can get in, or can students sort of pop in and out?
Yeah, this is really interesting. So one of the things that was important to me was supervising the teams and understanding who does what, because as you said at the beginning, I'm looking after project management, and I wanted these capstone projects to be properly managed. And I needed to make sure that I, as the external mentor or academic in charge, can monitor students' performance and can monitor that they do what they are assigned to do. So because of that, I had to create individual teams environments for every student group, because I'm using a tool that's part of the Teams platform called Planner, which I can only use in a team, not in a channel.
Right.
And Planner is a tool that is a bit like a Kanban board. It's really allowing students in a very simple way to assign tasks that they need to work on and put a deadline to it, assign the people that work on that task, and make sure that the responsibilities are clearly articulated. For me, as the supervisor, it's really important to have that locked in right from the beginning. Whenever you plan for something, you need to show that you are taking responsibility by putting that task into Planner and monitoring the progress of that as a team, and ensuring that if somebody falls behind, you as a team pull them up and say, you haven't done this yet. And that facility of using Planner as the project management tool in the background, which is really not a big overhead for students, gives me the opportunity to hold students accountable for their individual work, because I now know that that particular exploration in the project, or that section in the background research, or that part of the presentation was the responsibility of an individual student. And for me, it is important that I can grade students based on their individual performance, even though they are working as a team. Just like an employer, I want to be able to monitor the performance of my employees on an individual basis. It doesn't help me if people hide behind a team of 8 or 20 or whatever, because then I don't know if I'm carrying too many people in the team. I don't know if the team is functioning effectively. I don't know if all my staff are able to do the job. And that simple tool gives me that opportunity to really monitor the team progress, see where they're at, but at the same time, link back the quality of the work to an individual rather than the whole team, which can benefit or possibly be to the detriment of that individual, depending if they are excelling over the team average or falling behind. But I don't want the team to be punished because an individual doesn't do what they do. And I don't want an individual to be left behind if they happen to work with team members that are not doing what they need to do.
Right. I suppose there's two aspects to that, isn't there? There's the real world skills, and I mean, project is a simple project management tool, I suppose. Planner is a simple project management tool, unlike sort of project or something which is sort of more industry based, so they're getting some skills that way. But also I like the idea that there's individual accountability based on the team's divvying up of the jobs, I suppose, of the responsibilities. I think that's really important.
And it's an important skill for them to learn, that teamwork doesn't actually mean one person does everything. It doesn't mean we are just arbitrarily dividing up the work and then bring it all back together again. But that teamwork is actually part of the planning process to identify who has a particular skill set and who is able to do a particular job well, and making that person accountable for what they do. For me, that's one of the most important lessons that they can take away from this unit, because when they go into industry, they're expected to be responsible for whatever they are employed to do. And if they haven't got that ability to be responsible, then they're not going to succeed in where they're going after they leave university.
Yeah. And another thing that you've mentioned to me before is the role of student reflection. A student having an opportunity to just reflect on how they're going, how they're performing. How do you manage that within the context of the technology environment, but also what purpose does that serve for you, and why is it valuable to add in?
Yeah, reflection is a really important part of the learning process. And as I mentioned to you before, the capstone is not designed to introduce a lot of new knowledge. There are more some generic skills that we want students to take away from the capstone. And there are things like presentation skills, because we never train enough to give presentations, and you can always improve on that. And it's about self-management as well, taking responsibility. So we've talked about that using Planner, but part of the whole self-management and learning is actually about reflecting on what you are doing and your experience as part of what's working as part of a team. And teamwork, as I said at the beginning, students are not particularly enthusiastic about teamwork, but teamwork is a really valuable activity for them to engage in and to learn from. And by putting in a reflective piece on the teamwork aspect, and I focus in particular about the trust element in teamwork, I ask students to keep a weekly diary of how the team is progressing, how they see their role in the team, what their contribution to the team is, the challenges they experienced, and the benefits of working as a team that they've experienced, and how trust slowly builds in that team over the period of time.
Right.
And by having a weekly diary, I get students to really stay up to date with their evolution in the team process, because it does change. And if you don't do it progressively, you just reflected it at the end when you finished everything, you actually forget how the evolution occurred. And the learning is in that evolution and how you influence that evolution of the teamwork. And for that, I needed to have a platform that allowed me to provide a safe space for the students where they can put their, I guess, very open thoughts, because it wasn't about them being in any way politically correct in their reflection. I wanted them to be very honest and open about how they felt, because that gives me an opportunity to see if a team is functioning or if I need to intervene and find some way of fixing a problem in the team early on. But also, I want the students to feel that they have a safe space that is not a formal communication channel to me, where they have to write an email and say, oh, I'm really having this problem and I need to evidence that. It's meant to be for them first and foremost, well knowing that I can read it, but it's meant to be a really safe space for them to articulate their learning, their evolution, their reflection on the teamwork process every week. And I was actually very enthused when I found OneNote Classroom as part of Teams, because it allowed me to create a channel for every student, because every student automatically has that space that I can monitor, that they can write in, that they can add to, and it's just there, and I don't actually have to worry about setting anything up. So it actually comes in as an automatic piece for me with no effort at all. And it provides the students right from the word go with an infrastructure that gives them a continuous workspace to just jot down what they think. And then at the end of the trimester, I'm asking them to take their notes from every week and consolidate that into a 2-page document where they then write up their reflection as a final element of reflective work, to reflect effectively on the weekly reflections and come to some sort of conclusion around the trust element in the team and how trust was built.
Yeah. So it seems like you kind of use it for them to think more metacognitively, step outside of the team process and think about where they're in, the storming, forming, norming, and whatever the other stages are that I remember from my studies. But also as almost like a formative assessment for you to see how they're tracking, how they're progressing, whether you need to intervene in some way.
Absolutely. It is a formative process, because it's about them assessing their work themselves effectively every week, their contribution, but also making a judgment on their team members. So it's almost a bit of peer assessment without actually assessing peer work. It's actually quite fascinating to read when you look at these reflections, because yes, most of the time the team member talks about what happened and what they did and how they felt in the context. But most of the time, there's also a reference to the other team members, sometimes more as a group and sometimes individuals in the group, and sometimes individuals without actually naming the individual, and that's perfectly fine too. But it's a really fascinating hybrid of an assessment piece, because the individual reflections are purely formative. They are not being marked. So the quality of them doesn't reflect in any way on their overall performance. But students, by and large, tend to treat it with diligence anyway, because they know that I look at them, which helps. And every now and then I need to intervene and say, hang on a minute, I can see there's a problem. Can I help in any way, or address the issue if I know what the issue is directly? And that gives them the confidence that they are not left alone and they're actually getting the help they need, which keeps them, again, more engaged, because it can be very frustrating to be in a team where you feel lost, or you feel that you are not going to get any exposure. And sometimes unfortunate combinations happen where a group of students, for whatever reason, feel that one student is not in sync with them and gangs up on that one student. And it's sometimes really difficult to resolve some of these tensions. But getting the ability to get background on how that happened and what's going on in the team helps you to understand that situation. And it's not a right or wrong, somebody's at fault, somebody isn't. It's just part of the normal teamwork process, where my role then becomes a mediator.
Yeah, right. And so just to sort of wrap up the chat, Bardo, I'm interested, because you're running a course which is highly collaborative, team-based, There's a lot of inherent project work built in. There will be some academics at universities at the moment trying to transition classes which have been more traditionally delivered into a similar kind of experience for learners, where they are working, the learners are working together. It's not about teacher just delivering, like your DVC said that you mentioned before. A couple of things about that. One, would you have any hints or tips or tricks for people who are sort of getting started with this? And secondly, have you seen in the university a lot of need for this? Are people now sort of going, we need to really sort of switch the way we're working, and have you seen a momentum that way, and what sort of tricks would you offer or tips would you offer?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting challenge. Just looking around our university that's been working in the online space for a long time, I don't think there's a silver bullet, because every unit, every subject is different and has different needs. And then also the way that we manage collaboration or engagement is actually very individual to the individual lecturer. So it's not about a one size fits all, but it's about finding the environment that you can make work in the context of what you are teaching. And for me, it was all about an easy collaboration platform that is integrated, where everything is in one space, where students have good access, where there's a mobile client where they can get notifications, where effectively my students now live on Teams. I post something at midnight. Yeah, last night I posted something about the ACS running a hackathon. And a minute later, I had a number of likes on my post, because the students actually have embraced the platform. And that's your first step to engagement, to keep the students interested in the platform and what you're doing. And maybe, and I think I'm hinting to that already with my statement, make it about things that relate to what you are teaching, not just teaching content only, but keep the platform alive with creating some sort of relevant posts every now and then, engaging with the students on communication that is relevant to the discipline, but maybe not directly relevant to what they're doing at the moment, by keeping that platform alive and interesting for students, so that they live on that platform and want to engage, and then feel actually empowered to communicate back. Because I think we underestimate how difficult it is for students to put a post up on a forum where there's 150 colleagues of them. And we need to break down these hurdles, because true collaboration can only occur if it's a two-way channel. And that's why I love Teams as a platform, because it is less formal. It's formal enough to still adhere to good online behavior rules. It is a platform that is relevant in the workplace, so it gives them a workplace skill. But for me, it's about making sure that communication on the platform is done with the minimum hurdle possible. And for me, that's one of the keys to successful engagement with students in the online space. One thing
it's interesting that you sort of you almost can sort of leveraging their reality of social media. You're almost creating a social media kind of feel about the way that it's interaction, and there's posts about stuff that's not just teaching content, which is really interesting, because obviously that's a environment that many students are very familiar with.
And it's an environment that the students like, and it creates a familiarity, which I think helps break down that hurdle of engaging with the platform, engaging with colleagues, and engaging with their teachers. But the other element that I really like and that helps me tremendously, and again, it's a personal thing that won't work for everyone, is that I can just open a video call or an audio call directly to a student if I see that the student wants to talk. And if I've got 5 minutes, I can call them there and then, or tell them to call me there and then, and get the problem resolved. So it creates not just the ability to communicate, but it creates an ability to remove hurdles and obstacles pretty much in real time. In most cases, there will be within the next couple of hours, a 5-minute slot that I can engage with my students and actually say, guys, get together as a team. I'm going to talk to you at 3 o'clock. I'm just going to explain to you what's going on. Everybody logs into the chat and everybody will actually get the message. And it's much more efficient for me than sending emails to everyone and waiting for responses, because a communication, a dialogue will resolve problems much more efficiently. And that's something that gives the students an opportunity to engage with me, get to know me a little bit better as well. but also it gives me a chance to engage with the students when they need me most, in an ad hoc way without much of overheads and by reducing my email inbox tremendously. So it's actually an efficient way to engage as well.
Fascinating to talk to you, Bardo. Thank you so much for your insights and your willingness to share. And I can see that we might have another chat about learning analytics at some point, because that's also an area of fascination for me in some of the work that we do. So thank you so much for being willing to share some of your insights about how you run a collaborative classroom. I love that idea within the capstone course of those project groups working together as their own little team unit, and the way that you're sort of acting as a facilitator, I think is fascinating. And I think there's a lot that we can all learn about the way that you're running those courses. So thanks again for the chat.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.